The night is not silent. Even when you close your eyes and believe that you are alone, something moves in the depth of a whisper, the labyrinth unconscious, shaping images, summoning, bending your very. You think you are dreaming, but the truth is more sinister. It is the dream is dreaming you. Before we continue, write in the comments if you have ever felt pursued by a dream that refused to leave you. Your story is part of this forbidden descent, and if you are not yet subscribed, join us now, because the journey into Jung's hidden truth has only begun. Statistics remain buried in academic journals, ignored by most. Scientists estimate that the average human spends more than 20 years of life inside the theater of dreams, 2 decades where the body lies inert, while the soul is led into obscure kingdoms. What happens in those lost years is not mere fantasy, it is programming. It is the rewriting of your destiny, and Jung warned us, ignore your dreams, and you are condemned to be ruled by them inside. Let me open this door with a story. A young woman once came to Jung in Zurich, her eyes with her hands trembling. She confessed to recurring dreams of drowning and watching her father stand motionless on the shore. The smell of algae, the suffocating cold, the echo of her own heartbeat under the water, all of it repeated night after night. Jung listened in silence, as if her words were fragments of an ancient scripture. He did not see a random nightmare. He saw the shadow of the father archetype, standing as a merciless judge over her life. The dream was a command. It was reshaping her choices, poisoning her relationships, turning every man she met into another shore from which she begged for salvation. This is not superstition. Modern neuroscience has now uncovered how dreams consolidate memory, regulate emotion, and carve new pathways in the brain. Harvard studies reveal that during REM sleep, the amygdala ignites with primal fire, replaying trauma, weaving symbols, and deciding what pain remains alive in your waking hours. What you forget during the day, your dreams remember with cruel precision. They tattoo it into your nervous system. They become the secret engineers of your decision. But this truth is older than science. The ancients knew. The Egyptians believed dreams were messages from the gods, carved into the fabric of eternity. The Greeks built temples of incubation where seekers would sleep and await divine visions. The Bible whispers warnings in Joseph's interpretations of Pharaoh's dreams, prophecies that dictated the survival of nations. Across Buddhism, the dream is the mirror of illusion, revealing the chain of attachments that bind the soul. Jung was not inventing. He was remembering what humanity once feared, that your dream is a commandment, and disobedience to it breeds disaster. Imagine now that you ignore your dreams. You dismiss them as foolishness. You wake, brush your teeth, scroll through your device, and continue as if the night were only dark. But in silence, the dream lingers. It becomes a hidden conductor. You feel inexplicable fear when you meet a stranger, yet you do not recall that the night before you saw his face behind the mask of a wolf. You feel drawn to a place, a city, a house, without logic, because the dream has already carved its. The warning signs are subtle, a sudden déjà vu, a chilling repetition, a face from your past that returns in every shadow. Each is a thread from the dream, pulling you deeper into the invisible. The stages of this phenomenon unfold like an ancient tragedy. First, the whisper, fleeting images half forgotten in the morning light. Then, the repetition, symbols that return with insistence, like a snake circling your bed. Next, the possession. Your choices align with the dream's hidden script. And finally, the collapse. The dream consumes your waking reality until you no longer know if you are awake or still inside the night. Do not think this is only individual. Collective dreams exist, Jung warned, erupting as myths, ideologies, and mass hysteria. When entire nations dream the same fear, the same enemy, the same promise of salvation, reality bends. Wars begin. Dictators rise. Societies march into the abyss, believing they are awake. In truth, they are sleepwalking through a nightmare. The archetype swallows the collective mind. What then is the path of survival? It is not denial. To deny the dream is to surrender. Jung insisted on confrontation. You must turn toward the abyss, record the dream, dissect its symbols, wrestle with its demons. Consciousness is your only shield. Awareness is your only weapon. Every time you write a dream, every time you ask, What is this shadow trying to? You are building a fortress possession. When the nightmare returns, and it will, you will face the figure on the. Remember this, for it is the iron law of the psyche. What you refuse to see in dreams will rule you in silence. The shadow thrives in blindness. Awareness is its poison. To awaken is not to kill the dream, to step into it armed with the fire of consciousness. And so we close this first door with a final warning. Dreams are not entertainment. They are the black mirror of your soul, the forbidden scripture of your life. To ignore them is to give your fate into invisible hands. To face them is to reclaim your freedom. The choice, as always, is yours. Comment below if you have ever felt a dream chasing you into daylight. Share your story, for in the telling we awaken together. And do not forget, subscribe, for this is only the beginning of a descent into the forbidden knowledge Jung left behind. The dream does not speak in words. It does not knock on your door with sentences you can easily translate. Instead, it cloaks itself in symbols, each one more disturbing than the last. Jung once said, "The dream is a theater in which the dreamer is himself the scene, the actor, the prompter, the producer, and the critic." In other words, the dream is not merely a picture. It is a secret script, written by forces you barely recognize within yourself, yet powerful enough to dictate the course of your existence. Let me take you into the room of a patient Jung once described. He was a man in his 40s, polished in speech, respected in business, yet shattered within. Night after night, he dreamed of a woman with eyes like molten silver. She would stand at the edge of his bed, silent, holding a key. He never saw her lips move, but her presence pulsed with unbearable intensity. The smell of metal, the shimmer of moonlight on her skin, the silence that pressed into his ears, all were realer than waking life. Over months, his health crumbled, his marriage decayed. He confessed to Jung with a trembling voice, "I feel her when I am awake." Jung did not call her a ghost. He named her an anima figure, an archetype of the unconscious, a forbidden goddess rising from the abyss of. The dream was not fantasy, it was possession in symbolic form. The silver eyes were not merely strange, they were an encoded warning of his obsession with control, his fixation on perfection, his hidden hunger for the feminine he had banished from his conscious life. The dream was speaking, but only in the tongue of symbols. Now science has come closer to confirming what Jung intuited. In brain scans of sleeping subjects, researchers at MIT discovered that regions responsible for emotional regulation and symbolic association glow with furious activity during REM. The brain is not replaying life literally. It is translating. It is stitching together fragments of fear, memory, and desire into cryptic symbols because the unconscious mind cannot speak to us directly. That is why your childhood home can appear as a burning castle, why your dead grandmother can emerge as a crow, why a locked door in a dream can leave you with panic for days. These are not accidents. They are encrypted instruction, yet this encryption is ancient. The Egyptians placed dream manuals in the tombs of their kings, believing that symbols seen in the night were guidance for the afterlife. The Greeks filled the temples of Asclepius with carvings of serpents and suns, convinced that dreams were coded medicine for the soul. Across the desert sands, the Quran tells of Joseph interpreting Pharaoh's dream of thin cows devouring fat cows, a nightmare-side famine. Jung was not a mystic in the clouds. He was a translator of this primordial language. But beware the danger. Symbols are not decorative. They are traps. Ignore them, and you walk blindly into their snares. You dream of falling, and the next week you destroy yourself with reckless choices. You dream of blood, and soon after you feel consumed by rage you cannot explain. Each symbol is a warning flare. They are signals disguised as shadows, and the cost of neglect is the stages unfold with terrifying precision. First, the symbol appears as a whisper, a single crow on a rooftop, a cracked mirror, a whispering child. Then repetition tightens its grip. The crow multiplies, the mirror shatters again and again, the child screams instead of whispers. Next, the symbol invades waking life. You begin to notice crows outside your window. You feel unease standing before a mirror. You sense children watching you with hollow eyes. Finally, the symbol becomes destiny. You no longer interpret it, you live it. This phenomenon is not confined to individuals. Entire societies are enslaved by symbols. Think of the swastika, once an ancient sign of balance, hijacked into a nightmare that consumed millions. Think of the eagle, stretched across flags, dictating war and dominance. Symbols possess not only one person, but entire nations. They are not images. They are weapons of the unconscious. So what is the protocol of survival? You cannot banish symbols. You cannot silence. What you can do is confront them as one confronts a riddle. Write them down. Sketch them. Speak their name aloud. Jung trained his patients to dialogue with their symbols, to face them like living beings in the theater of active imagination. When you see the woman with silver eyes, you do not run. You ask her, "What key are you holding?" You do not destroy the crow. You follow it into the woods of your mind and listen to its call. In the act of dialogue, the symbol reveals its secret. Consciousness dissolves its venom. And yet, I warn you, there is no final victory. The unconscious will always create new scripts, darker riddles, deeper shadows. The work never ends. To live is to interpret endlessly. To ignore is to become a puppet of your own abyss. Let this truth echo in your mind. Your dreams are not accidents. They are encrypted letters sent from the depths of your soul. Read them, or they will read you. Face them, or they will face you in silence. The symbol does not wait for permission. It acts, and unless you awaken, will act through you. Share below the strangest symbol you have ever seen a dream. Perhaps in the telling, its hidden meaning will reveal its, and subscribe, for this descent has only begun. Not all dreams are gentle messengers. Some arrive as brutal invaders, breaking into your sleep like thieves. They do not bring comfort, they bring terror. They shake you awake with sweat dripping down your body, your heart hammering against your ribs as if trying to escape. These are nightmares, and Jung taught us to fear them not because they are bad dreams, but because they are the shadow itself, breathing directly into your soul. Imagine a boy of 13 who came trembling to Jung's clinic in the early years of his practice. His nights were haunted by the same recurring image, a black wolf standing at the foot of his bed. Its fur glistened with dampness, its breath smelled of blood and earth, and its eyes glowed with a red that seemed older than time. Each night the wolf came closer. Each night the boy woke screaming. His parents dismissed it as childish fear, but Jung listened as though hearing the confession of a priest. For him, the wolf was no fantasy. It was the archetype of the predator, the unspoken violence coiled in the boy's own family, waiting to devour him from within. Modern science now supports what Jung perceived. Studies from Stanford reveal that nightmares are not random eruptions, but the brain's brutal rehearsal for survival. When the amygdala floods with fear during a REM, the mind simulates attack, danger, humiliation, the smell of blood, the sound of teeth snapping, the feeling of falling into endless void. These are not mistakes. They are drills, yet they are also revelations. Nightmares spotlight what you repress. They expose the shadow. Ignore them, and you allow that shadow to seep unnoticed into your waking choices. The ancients knew this dread well. In Mesopotamian tablets, nightmares were seen as the claws of demons visiting sleepers in the dark. Medieval monks wrote of the incubus that pressed upon the chest of the sleeping, suffocating them with guilt and temptation. In Buddhism, terrifying dream figures are called Mara, embodiments of delusion and desire that threaten awakening. Different cultures, same conclusion. Nightmares are not illusions. They are masks of the shadow, tearing open the curtain of safety to show you the abyss you refuse to face. And the signs are always there, like a trail of ashes leading deeper into the forest. You dream of being chased through empty space, and soon you notice you avoid confrontation in waking life. You dream of suffocation, and soon you realize you are trapped in a relationship that silences you. You dream of drowning, and your days are filled with obligations pulling you under. Each nightmare is a prophecy. Each is a mirror. They do not predict the future. They expose the present you have denied. The stages of nightmare possession are relentless. First, intrusion, a single dream that unsettles, dismissed by morning light. Then repetition. The wolf returns. The faceless man appears again. The drowning. Third, escalation. The dream grows violent. Sensory details sharpen. The terror becomes unbearable, finally collapse. You wake in fear every night, exhausted, unable to separate sleep from waking. The nightmare is no longer a dream. It is your life. Do not think society escapes. Collective nightmares exist, you warned. When whole nations project their shadow onto an enemy, witch hunts, genocides, hysterias, they are nightmares acted out in daylight. A group, a people, a country becomes possessed by the predator archetype. They dream the same wolf, and instead of facing it within, they slaughter each other without. How do you protect yourself when the wolf comes for you? You cannot flee. Flight strengthens the shadow. Jung demanded confrontation. Write the nightmare. Draw it. Speak it aloud as though you were summoning the wolf into your room. Then ask, "What are you here to teach me?" For nightmares are teachers in grotesque masks. They bring lessons you have rejected with such violence that only terror could force you to face them consciously is to strip them of poison, and yet the cost is heavy. To face the wolf, your rage, despair. Few dare to do it. Most prefer distraction, medication, silence. But beware, what you silence returns sharper. What you medicate festers. The nightmare ignored becomes the shadow embodied. It lives through you, in cruelty, in addiction, in betrayal. The only path is to descend. So remember this: the nightmare is not your enemy. It is the unacknowledged part of your soul, the shadow that demands recognition. To run is to surrender. To face it, the wolf at the end of your bed may terrify you, but it is your wolf. Until you face it, it will always be. Now I ask you, have you ever woken drenched in fear, your dream still clinging to you? Tell me in the comments the nightmare that has followed you into, and subscribe, for we are only beginning to open the gates Jung left for. Gates that lead not to comfort, but to the forbidden kingdom of the soul. Dreams are not random sparks of neurons as modern reductionists like to believe. They are not chaotic storms of meaningless imagery. They are ancient structures, older than language, older than civilization itself. Jung called them archetypes, universal patterns that emerge in every culture, in every age, wearing different masks, but carrying the same hidden power. When you dream, you are not simply imagining. You are being summoned by these primordial forces that inhabit the deep unconscious. Let me tell you of a man Jung once described, a soldier who returned from war broken, his eyes hollow, his voice cracked by silence. In his dreams, he was forever standing in a ruined cathedral, ceiling shattered, moonlight spilling over broken statues. In the shadows, he always saw the figure of a child carrying a torch, but every time he approached, the child's face dissolved into smoke. Jung recognized at once the archetype of the divine child, the eternal symbol of renewal and hope. But the soldier could not grasp. He had buried the innocence of his own soul beneath the corpses. The dream was not only his, it was humanity's. It was the cry of a world consumed by violence, still holding a torch of renewal in trembling hands. Science has begun to circle this forbidden truth. Neuroimaging shows that when people dream of recurring figures, heroes, mothers, shadows, the brain recruits networks associated with social memory and story. The brain is not inventing. It is replaying humanity's most ancient myths. Cognitive scientists from the University of Toronto found that dreams often reflect recurring narrative templates, as if we are wired to dream the same stories our ancestors carved into stone. Modern data confirms Jung's suspicion. The archetypes are real, coded into the very architecture of our nervous system. But this revelation is not new. The archetypes have been worshipped for millennia. The Greeks knew them as gods: Athena, the wise mother; Ares, the predator; Hermes, the trickster. The Hindus preserved them as deities of the cosmos, each embodying a force of creation or destruction. Christianity clothed them in saints and demons, Christ as the eternal hero, Satan as the devouring shadow. Whether in myth, scripture, or dream, the forms repeat. Jung merely gave them a forbidden name: the collective unconscious. These figures are not harmless. They are not decorative masks. They command. They invade your dreams with orders, with temptation, with scripts you do not recognize until you are already living them. You dream of the hero, and you wake restless, longing to escape your ordinary life. You dream of the mother, and suddenly you cling to others with desperate hunger for comfort. You dream of the trickster, and soon you find yourself lying, deceiving, sabotaging your own stability. Archetypes do not knock politely. The stages of their possession unfold with chilling inevitability. First, appearance. The archetype enters the dream, wearing its ancient mask. Then, fascination. You cannot stop thinking of the figure, haunted by its image. Third, alignment. Your actions bend subtly toward the shaping your relationships. And finally, dominate. You are no longer you are an actor playing a role written thousands of years before. And so it happens not only to individuals, but to civilization. Entire societies fall under archetypal possession. Think of revolutions that worship the hero, building monuments to saviors while drowning in blood. Think of empires that kneel before the father archetype, demanding obedience and sacrifice. Think of movements intoxicated by the trickster, spreading lies until reality itself dissolves. History is the dream of archetype, written in fire and blood. How then do you survive their grip? You cannot banish them. They are eternal. The only shield is consciousness. To see the archetype is to weaken its spell. When you dream of the child with a torch, write it down. Recognize it as the divine child, the symbol of hope and rebirth. When you see the wolf, call it by name, the predator. When the trickster grins at you, whisper, "I know you." Naming the archetype is like lighting a candle in the abyss. It does not destroy the darkness, but it keeps it from devouring you whole. Still, I warn you, awareness is not victory. The archetypes are patient. They return again and again, wearing new masks, whispering new scripts. To live is to wrestle eternally with. To ignore them is to become their prey. To face them, to carve freedom, one fragile moment at a time. So let this truth echo. Your dreams they are the stage of humanity's oldest myths, reenacted through your fragile body. Each night you step into a theater where gods, demons, heroes, and monsters demand their roles. To pretend otherwise is to live a lie. Comment below. Have you ever dreamed of figures that felt larger than life? Ancient, terrifying, or holy? Share them, for in your stories we may glimpse the masks of the archetypes that command us all. And subscribe, for the descent is far from over. The most terrifying truth is not that you dream. It is that your dreams dream you. They write a script you did not consent to, and without realizing it, you step into the role, line by line, gesture by gesture, until your waking life becomes an echo of the night. Jung called this the danger of unconscious. When the shadow that rises in your dreams is not confronted, it infiltrates every decision, every glance, every silence. Consider the case of a woman who came to Jung during the final years of his. She was elegant, intelligent, respected by her community. Yet she confessed that for years she had been haunted by the same dream. She was standing in her childhood home, staring into a mirror, but the mirror never reflected her. Instead, it showed the face of a corpse, its lips stitched shut with black thread. She would wake shaking, unable to breathe. At first, she dismissed it. Later, she tried to forget. But soon her life began to unravel. Her marriage collapsed. Her health deteriorated. Her voice, once strong, became fragile, hesitant, trembling. She said to Jung in a whisper, "I feel like the corpse in the mirror." Jung did not see coincidence. He saw destiny. The dream was not warning her of a future. It was sculpting her present. By ignoring it, she had allowed its shadow to take form. The corpse with stitched lips was her own silence, her repression, her refusal to speak her truth. The longer she resisted, the more the dream wove itself into her waking life. Modern research confirms this forbidden mechanism. Studies at the University of Geneva show that dreams directly influence emotional regulation. Traumatic dreams leave measurable imprints on heart rate and cortisol levels during the day. People who suppress their dreams show higher rates of anxiety, depression, and even physical illness. In other words, the corpse in the mirror does not stay in the dream. It follows you, staining your body, corrupting your choice. Jung's warning was not poetic, it was biological. Ancient wisdom also whispered of this danger. In Hindu philosophy, the dream was seen as one of the many veils of Maya, illusion that binds the. In Greek tragedy, ignoring a dream was hubris, a defiance against the gods that led inevitably to ruin. The Bible is filled with men destroyed because they ignored warnings given in the night. Humanity has always known. To disregard the dream is to invite catastrophe. The signs of infiltration are subtle at first, like cracks in glass spreading beneath the surface. You wake with a vague unease. You find yourself hesitating in moments where you once acted boldly. You feel an inexplicable attraction to certain places, people, or dangers. These are not whims. They are threads from the dream, weaving silently into your decision. And then, when you least expect it, the collapse arrives. You find yourself living the very nightmare you once dismissed as just a dream. The stages of this descent are predictable. First, contamination. The dream lingers in memory, affecting mood. Then, imitation. Behaviors in waking life unconsciously mirror the dream. Next, embodiment. Your body begins to carry the dream burden in sickness, fatigue, or anxiety. Finally, your waking world becomes indistinguishable. You are no longer living. This is not only personal. Entire societies fall prey to this infiltration. When masses share the same collective dream, fear of invasion, hunger for a savior, hatred of an enemy, the dream becomes history. Wars are fought not because of reality, but because of dream possession. Ideologies are born from nightmares disguised as visions. Jung warned that the 20th century's bloodshed was not rational politics, but archetypal shadows erupting into history. And the same is true now. Humanity is still dreaming itself toward ruin. What can be done when the dream begins to whisper? Jung's answer was ruthless honesty. You must drag the dream into the light of consciousness. Write it down. Name the corpse in the mirror. Confront the stitched. Speak the words you fear to speak. Consciousness is the only force that breaks the spell. Without it, you remain a puppet in the theater of the unconscious. But do not mistake this. To confront the dream is to confront yourself, naked and merciless. You will see truths you have buried for decades. You will face desires you deny, hatreds you conceal, wounds you pretend are healed. The dream does not lie. It exposes. To survive it, you must be willing to carry the unbearable weight of your own soul. Few dare to do so. Most choose blindness, and blindness is precisely what the shadow feeds upon. So let this warning reverberate. Your dreams are not harmless. They are silent architects of your fate. To ignore them is to hand over your life to forces you cannot see. To face them is to seize back the fragile thread of freedom. The choice is yours, but the cost of ignorance is always the same. Destiny written in the language of nightmares. Tell me, have you ever lived a moment that felt like a dream repeated in daylight? Write it below, for in sharing, we loosen the grip of the shadow. And subscribe, because this descent is far from its end. The dreams are waiting, and their whispers grow louder each night. The unconscious does not conquer in a single night. It is patient, precise, methodical. Its invasion is staged like a slow descent into a labyrinth, each turn darker, each corridor narrower, until you realize too late that you are no longer wandering. You are imprisoned. Jung warned that ignoring this progression is the surest way to become enslaved by it. What begins as a faint whisper in a dream can end as full possession of your wake. Picture a young man Jung once treated, a scholar obsessed with reason. He dismissed his dreams as noise, electrical static of the brain, as he proudly called them. But one dream recurred. He was walking down a spiral staircase into a cellar where a pale figure sat in chains. The figure's eyes glowed faintly, its mouth smeared with ash. The young man always turned back in fear before reaching the bottom. Over months, his behavior shifted. He became anxious, withdrawn, plagued by inexplicable anger. Finally, he suffered a breakdown. Jung revealed to him that the chained figure was his own shadow, the rage, shame, and instinct he had buried beneath his intellectual mass. By refusing the descent in the dream, he had allowed it to descend into his waking life. Modern psychology confirms this pattern. Researchers at the University of Montreal discovered that dreams function as emotional regulators, processing what consciousness refuses to face. But when these dreams are ignored or suppressed, unresolved content leaks into waking behavior, escalating into anxiety disorders, depression, and compulsive behaviors. What Jung described as shadow possession is visible today in clinical data. The nightmare you flee becomes the symptom you live. This is why ancient traditions always described spiritual descent as a journey in stages. The Greeks spoke of katabasis, the ritual descent into Hades, where each stage revealed a new trial. Dante mapped 9 circles of hell, each more consuming than the last. Tibetan Buddhism describes the Bardo states after death, a progression of terrifying visions confronting the soul with its own illusions. Jung saw the same pattern in dreams: descent, confrontation, collapse, rebirth. The stages of possession can be described with unsettling clarity. First comes the whisper. A symbol or figure enters a dream, briefly: a black feather, a faceless man, a locked door. It unsettles you but feels insignificant. Then comes the return. The same image recurs, sharper, heavier, carrying a chill of inevitability. You begin to sense it is following you. Next is the intrusion. The symbol breaks into waking life. You see feathers on the street, feel dread at doors, sense someone watching. Then arrives the infection. Your thoughts bend toward the symbol, your emotions spiral around it, relationships crack beneath its weight. Finally, the possession. You no longer carry the dream carries you. It dictates your choices, your fears, your fate. This possession is not limited to individuals. Societies descend in the same stages. A whisper of fear spreads in rumors. The fear returns in speeches and propaganda. Intrusion arrives as symbols, flags, slogans, myths, flooding public life. Infection corrodes institutions, twisting every action through the lens of the dream. And finally, possession. Entire nations live within a collective nightmare, unable to distinguish reality from archetype. The 20th century was filled with such descents. The 21st is no different. How can one resist this descent? Jung's protocol was both brutal and liberating. You must willingly walk down the staircase. You must descend consciously into the dream rather than fleeing. Write it down. Enter it through active imagination. Face the chained figure. Speak to the faceless man. The descent becomes survivable only when undertaken with awareness. Consciousness does not erase the shadow. It prevents the shadow from seizing the throne of your soul. Yet this path is terrifying. To face the chained figure is to admit your rage. To touch the locked door is to admit your secret. To stare at the faceless man is to admit your emptiness. Few dare. Most remain at the first stage, pretending the whisper was nothing. But the whisper always grows, always. So let this warning sink deep. Every dream that unsettles you is the first step of a descent. To ignore it is to continue walking blind into the labyrinth. To face it is to carry a torch, fragile but defiant, into the underworld. The descent is inevitable. What matters is whether you walk it awake or sleepwalk in. Tell me, have you ever felt a dream bleed into your waking life, growing stronger the more you ignored it? Write it below, for in sharing, we illuminate the labyrinth together. And subscribe. Because the descent has not reached its end, we have only reached the middle circle. The shadows are waiting in the deeper chambers. The dream is not yours alone. When you close your eyes at night, you may believe you are wandering through a private, but in truth, you are entering a cathedral where countless souls have walked. Jung called it the collective unconscious, and he warned that dreams do not stop at the boundaries of the individual. They seep outward, binding families, tribes, nations, and civilizations into patterns as ancient as fire. Consider the eruption of nightmares in Germany before the Second World. Jung watched with dread. Society began to dream the same dream. He wrote of psychic epidemics, describing them as far more dangerous than any physical. He saw a nation possessed by the archetype of the Wotan, the ancient storm god of frenzy and war. Nightmares of invasion, humiliation, and hunger became reality because an entire people fell asleep at once, hypnotized by symbols that awakened their shadow. The swastika was not just a political emblem. It was a dream image, torn from the collective unconscious and wielded as a weapon. Millions marched into death not because they were awake, because they were trapped in a collective nightmare. Science has begun to document what Jung saw with prophetic eyes. Studies in cultural psychology reveal that trauma dreams are often shared within communities. Survivors of war, famine, or catastrophe dream the same imagery: falling bombs, burning houses, faceless executioners, long after the event has ended. Neuroscientists in Israel found that children of Holocaust survivors frequently report nightmares that mirror their parents, as if the dream has been inherited through invisible threads. Modern data proves Jung's suspicion. The collective dream is not metaphor. It is measurable reality, and this is not new. The Greeks spoke of the miasma, a spiritual pollution that haunted entire cities after acts of collective violence. The Bible warns of nations blinded by visions, where prophets see the same flames, the same downfall, echoing through generations. In Native American traditions, dream-sharing circles were used not only for healing, but for protecting the tribe from nightmares that threatened the whole community. Ancient wisdom always knew the dream is not private, it is viral. The signs of a collective dream are subtle at first. Whispers in families, children repeating the same fears as their parents, communities telling the same story of loss over and over, nations repeating the same slogans in their sleep, and then it escalates. A symbol appears, a flag, a mask, a phrase that infects millions. Soon reality bends around it. People act not as individuals but as characters in a dream they did not choose. Wars ignite, markets collapse, cults rise, all because the dream has escaped the bedroom and taken the street. The stages of this possession are predictable. First, the private dream, nightmares echoing in individuals. Then, the echo, repetition in families, communities, small groups. Next, the amplification, myths, speeches, images that give the dream a public mask. Then, the eruption, mass hysteria, movements, revolutions. Finally, the catastrophe. History itself bends into the shape of the nightmare. This is how civilizations collapse, not through reason, but through dream possession. Is there protection against the collective dream? Jung believed there was, but it required almost superhuman courage. The individual must awaken while the group sleeps. To resist the storm, you must first recognize it as a dream. You must dare to say, this image is not reality. This hysteria is not truth. This God is only an archetype wearing a mask. To awaken in a sleeping society is to carry unbearable weight. You will be mocked, exiled, silenced. But in awakening, you keep the thread of reality alive. And sometimes, one awakened soul is enough to prevent total collapse, yet most surrender. It is easier to march in step, to chant the slogan, to drown in the collective dream, than to carry the burden of solitude. That is why Jung said, the greatest danger to humanity is not weapon, not famine, not disease, epidemics. A society that sleeps together dreams itself into destruction. So let this truth strike you like cold iron. The dream you ignore in your private night may one day rise as the nightmare of your people. To awaken yourself is not selfish. It is the only act that may save a generation. Have you ever felt caught in a collective dream, a movement, a hysteria, a story everyone seemed to believe at once? Tell me below, for in naming it, we begin to loosen its grip. And subscribe, because the descent does not end here. The shadows are not finished with us. Control does not announce itself with thunder. It creeps in silence, hidden in details you overlook. By the time you recognize the signs, the dream has already wrapped its fingers. Jung warned that the unconscious not conquer by force. It conquers by seduction, by whisper, by subtle manipulations that appear harmless until they become chains. Let me tell you of a patient who came to Jung trembling with confusion. He was a banker, wealthy, respected, outwardly in control. But his dreams were relentless. Every night he saw a theater filled with faceless actors, all staring at him in silence. He would wake drenched in sweat, hearing echoes of applause that never ended. At first, he dismissed it as nonsense, but soon he began to feel watched during the day. In meetings, he could not shake the sense that everyone around him was silently judging. His confidence cracked. His decisions faltered. Eventually, he confessed to Jung, I feel like I am living for an invisible audience. The dream had crossed the border. It had already taken command. Modern science shows how subtle these are. Neuroscientists at UC Berkeley discovered that dreams of social rejection activate the same neural circuits as real humiliation, leaving a residue of shame that carries into waking hours. Psychologists at Harvard found that even a forgotten dream can alter decision-making, nudging people toward avoidance, hesitation. In other words, Even when you do not recall the dream, it remembers you. Its fingerprints are all over your choice. Ancient wisdom also spoke of such invisible signs. Shamans warned of spirits that clung to men like shadows, whispering doubts into their ears. Early Christian mystics wrote of noonday demons, subtle influences that drained vitality without reason. In Buddhist texts, the subtle signs of delusion are described as seeds planted in the unconscious, blooming into suffering long after the moment has passed. Whether called spirits, demons, or seeds, the truth is the same. The danger is not obvious. It is hidden in plain sight. What are these signs? They are not bullet points on a list. They are scenes of suspense unfolding in your own life. You wake with a bit of ash in your mouth. Though you cannot recall the dream, you feel a sudden dread when standing before a mirror, sensing it hides more than it reveals. You hesitate before answering a simple question, hearing a voice that is not yours, whispering. You feel trapped in repetition, meeting the same kind of lover who betrays, falling into the same conflicts, sabotaging in the same way. These are not coincident. They are the dream controlling you, guiding you with invisible. The stages of these warnings are chilling. At first, they are fleeting sensations, dismissed as fatigue or chill. Then they grow into pattern, repetition of fears, habits, and relationships that feel eerily familiar. Next, they manifest as compulsion. You cannot stop yourself from acting against your own interests. Finally, they harden into destiny. The dream has fully scripted your life, and you are only performing. This contagion does not stop with the individual. Families live under a child repeats the addiction of a parent. Generations reenact the same tragedies as if a dream were inherited in blood. Societies feel the same unease, sense the same invisible enemy, and act in unison as though hypnotized. These are the collective warnings, and most ignore them until catastrophe. Is there a protocol for protection? Jung insisted that recognition is the first shield. To name the sign is to weaken it. If you feel the dread before the mirror, write it down. If you notice the repetition in your relationship, confess it, face it, break it open with awareness. The unconscious thrives in silence. Speak its name. Power cracks. Yet awareness must be ruthless. To dismiss even one warning is to leave the door open for possession. But beware, this work is not comfortable. To face the signs is to admit you are not the master of your life. It is to admit you are haunted, and most cannot bear this. They prefer the illusion of control, the lie of independence, the comfort of blindness. But blindness is exactly what the dream desires. So let this be carved into your memory. The dream does not need your permission to control you. It only needs your ignorance. The warnings are there every day, in déjà vu, in silence, in repetition, in dread. To ignore them is to surrender. To face them is to awaken. Now I ask you, have you noticed signs in your own life that felt like invisible strings pulling you? Share them below, for in naming them, you begin to cut the threads. And subscribe, for the descent has not ended. The deeper signs are yet to be revealed. When the dream begins to control you, when the symbols tighten like nooses and the shadow whispers through every decision, the question becomes inevitable. Is there any defense? Jung believed there is, but he warned it is not easy, not gentle, not comforting. The unconscious cannot be destroyed. It can only be confronted. Survival depends on conscious, wielded like a fragile torch in a cavern filled with predators. Jung's method was not a ritual of magic nor a doctrine of it was a discipline of ruthless honesty. He called it active imagination, the deliberate act of entering the dream while awake. Imagine sitting alone in a darkened room, eyes closed, pen in hand. You invite the figure from your nightmare to the wolf, the faceless man, the corpse in the mirror. You do not flee, stare, you ask questions, you write the answers that rise from the abyss of your mind. It is dialogue with the unconscious, a way of transforming terror into knowledge. Jung taught that by facing the dream consciously, its possession weakens. The chain does not break, but it loosens. Science now validates this survival protocol. Cognitive behavioral therapy for nightmares, known as imagery rehearsal therapy, asks patients to rewrite their nightmares consciously, altering the script to confront the terror. Clinical studies show remarkable success. Patients report reduced symptoms of PTSD, improved sleep, and diminished anxiety. What Jung intuited, science confirms. Consciousness reshapes the dream's grip. Awareness does not erase the shadow, but it gives you a shield. Ancient traditions always described similar practices. Tibetan Buddhists teach dream yoga, a discipline of awakening inside the dream, confronting illusions directly. The Stoics of Greece and Rome wrote of rehearsing catastrophe in the imagination so that terror lost its power. Early Christian mystics spoke of vigilantia, a state of wakeful prayer in which the believer confronted demons of the night, conscious. Across time, humanity knew survival is awareness, but let us not romanticize. The protocol is not simple. To face your dream is to risk, when you summon the faceless man, to endure his. When you stare at the corpse in the mirror, you must admit the truth of your repression. When you confront the wolf, you must acknowledge your own violence. This is survival, but it is survival through fire. Jung himself wrote, "No tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell." The descent cannot be avoided. The only choice is whether you descend awake or in chains. The survival process unfolds in stages. First, recognition. You must admit the dream matters. Then, recording. Write it, sketch it, bring it into daylight. Next, confrontation. Re-enter the dream through imagination, dialogue with its figures. Then, integration. Allow the message of the dream to reshape your conscious choices. And finally, vigilance. Repeat endlessly, for the unconscious never sleeps and new symbols will always. This is not a cure. It is a discipline of survival. Societies, too, must adopt this protocol. When a collective dream rises, fear of invasion, worship of a savior, hatred of an enemy, the only hope is recognition. The prophet, the artist, the dissenter must name the dream aloud. By exposing the archetype, they weaken its possession. To remain silent is to allow the dream to devour nations. Survival of humanity itself may depend on this, the courage to name the dream before it becomes history. And so the rule is simple, though its practice is brutal. Consciousness is the only shield. Not wealth, not power, not denial. Only the fragile act of awakening, moment by moment, dream by dream. The unconscious will always return. The shadow will always. But with awareness, you can walk through the labyrinth without becoming its prisoner. So let these words strike you as iron in the dark. If you do not face your dream, it will fail. If you do not seize consciousness, this is not fluffy, this is survival. Tell me, have you ever tried to confront your dream deliberately, through writing, through art, through ritual? Share it below, for in sharing, we strengthen each other's shields. And subscribe, because the final descent still awaits. The closing gate has not yet opened, and the last revelation is near. There comes a moment when every descent reaches its end, not because the labyrinth is exhausted, but because you realize the corridors were never outside you. They were always within. Jung warned that the greatest danger is not the dream, not the archetype, not even the nightmare itself. The greatest danger is blindness, the refusal to see that the dream is your mirror. The shadow you flee is your own face. The final stage of survival is not escape, it is confrontation with yourself. Let me tell you of Jung's most haunting one he confessed only to his closest circle. He dreamed of standing at the edge of the world, gazing into a black sea under a crimson sky. From the depths rose a colossal figure with eyes of fire and a voice like thunder. It did not threaten. It simply spoke. "I am you." Jung awoke shaken, his body drenched in cold sweat. He understood the terror. The abyss was not an external demon, but his own soul unveiled. The dream had stripped away every mask, leaving only the raw confrontation with the self. Immense, terrifying, divine. Modern psychology dares to whisper the same. Depth researchers describe the integration of the shadow as the final task of individuation, to recognize that the enemy you fight in your dreams is not foreign, but a fragment of yourself. Neuroscience points in the same direction. Brain scans reveal that when people confront fears consciously, the amygdala calms and higher reasoning regions activate, as if the mind itself recognizes the monster is me, and in knowing it, I reclaim power. Science confirms the ancient terror. The wolf, the corpse, the faceless man, they are not invaders. They are fragments of your being, demanding recognition. The ancients knew this end of the descent. The Delphic oracle inscribed, "Know thyself." The Christian mystics spoke of the terrifying moment when the soul faces God and discovers its own image reflected. In Buddhism, enlightenment comes when the illusion of separation dissolves and the dreamer realizes he is both dream and dreamer. Across time, the conclusion is the same. The final enemy is the self, and to meet it is both annihilation and rebirth. The signs of this final descent are unmistakable. You no longer fear only the figures in your dreams, you fear yourself. You sense an abyss opening beneath every decision, a silence that reveals your contradiction. You look in a mirror and see not only your face, but the shadow behind your eyes. You wake from a nightmare not trembling at the monster, but trembling at the realization that the monster carried your own heartbeat. This is the final stage, recognition, terrible, liberating, inevitable. The stages of this final confrontation unfold like thunder. First, dissolution. Your illusions collapse, and you see the masks of your ego for what they are, fragile costumes. Then, revelation. The dream reveals its true face, and you recognize it as yourself. Next, annihilation. You feel shattered, as though your identity dissolves into finally rebirth. From those ashes rises the self, larger, darker, brighter than you ever imagined. Not perfection, not purity, but wholeness. Societies, too, face the nations collapse under the weight of their shadows, violence, greed, lies, and only in ruin do they confront their true nature. Whether they are reborn depends on whether they accept the reflection or deny it until extinction. Humanity itself now stands at such a mirror, trembling before its collective shadow. What, then, is the closing protocol? Jung gave no simple answer. He spoke instead of courage, to carry consciousness into the abyss, to whisper, "I see you," to the darkest parts of your soul, to accept that wholeness includes shadow as well as light. This is the only path. Not victory, but integration. Not conquest, but recognition. And so, the final truth, your dreams are not strangers. They are the language of your soul, the forbidden scripture you write each night. To ignore them is to remain a fragment. To face them is to become whole. But wholeness is not comfort. It is terror and magnificence intertwined. The last descent is not the end of the labyrinth. It is the beginning of yourself. So listen carefully to this echo. The dream you fear most is the doorway to your truth. The shadow you run from is your companion. The abyss you dread is the cradle of your soul. Step into it consciously or be dragged unconsciously. There is no other choice. If these words have struck you, do not let them fade into silence. Write below the dream that has haunted you most, and let us descend together. Subscribe, for this is not an end, but an initiation. The mirror has opened, the shadow waits, and it whispers your name.